The glass shatters first. A champagne flute hits Italian marble, fracturing into a constellation of crystal shards across the penthouse floor. The woman doesn't bend to clean it up. Not anymore. Her manicured fingers instead trace the edge of divorce papers bearing his triumphant signature bold, flourishing, victorious. Beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, the San Francisco skyline glitters indifferently. 15 years reduced to legal terminology and asset divisions. A marriage disassembled with surgical precision. "I'm leaving with everything," his text message had read. "You should have signed that prenup when you had the chance. Good luck starting over at 42. What he doesn't know, what his expensive lawyers never discovered, was the secret she's been building for 3 years. The alternate identity, the hidden accounts, the patient, meticulous construction of her counter strategy. She raises a different glass now, rare whiskey catching the dying light. By the time he realizes what she's done, it will already be too late. Some fires aren't meant to be extinguished. Some debts can only be paid in full. The grand Millennium Ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers as San Francisco's tech elite mingled with Wall Street's financial power players. Rebecca Mitchell stood by the champagne fountain, her black cocktail dress a stark contrast to her fiery red hair, watching the room with practiced ease. At 42, she had mastered the art of these high-stakes networking events, identifying power dynamics, creating strategic introductions, and maintaining her husband's carefully cultivated image as a financial visionary. "There you are." James Mitchell appeared at her side, champagne flute extended. "Anderson's looking for you. Something about that pediatric medical tech company you mentioned last month. He's interested." Rebecca accepted the glass with a practiced smile. "I'll find him after I speak with Senator Wilson's wife. She's chairing the foundation gala, and I promised we'd discuss donation levels." James nodded, his steel gray eyes already scanning the room for his next target. At 45, he cut an impressive figure in his tailored Brioni suit, tall, athletic despite his age, with premature silver temples that gave him an air of distinction. Good. And Rebecca? His hand brushed her lower back, a public display of affection that never quite reached his eyes. "Make sure Anderson understands the potential return timeline. We don't need another impatient investor." Of course. She'd been managing her husband's interpersonal relationships long enough to translate. "Make sure Anderson commits significant capital before the end of the quarter." As James moved away toward a cluster of hedge fund managers, Rebecca took a slow sip of champagne, allowing herself a moment of reflection. 15 years ago, she had been the one people sought out at these events, the wunderkind who had built and sold a cybersecurity company for 9 figures before turning 30. Now she was James Mitchell's wife, the elegant hostess, the woman who softened his edges and made his ruthless financial acumen more palatable in social settings. She had accepted this gradual diminishment as the natural evolution of their partnership, her technical brilliance complementing his financial genius, their combined networks creating opportunities neither could access alone. At least, that's what she had told herself as the years passed and her own identity became increasingly subsumed into his. The evening progressed predictably. Rebecca moved through the room with practiced grace, facilitating introductions, smoothing potential conflicts, ensuring James's access to the right people at the right moments. By midnight, 3 new investment prospects had been secured, 2 potential political connections established, and 1 embarrassing faux pas by a drunk board member diplomatically resolved. "Another successful evening," James commented during the ride home, his attention already on his phone, scrolling through emails. "Taylor's agreed to the Series B terms. That's an extra $40 million in the fund." "Good," Rebecca replied, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline. Their penthouse overlooking the bay waited, a showcase of modern luxury that appeared in architectural magazines but had never felt quite like home. "Sarah called earlier. She's finished her finals and wants to know if she can use the Napa House next weekend with some friends." James didn't look up. "Fine. Make sure the staff knows. And have Eric do a security check before they arrive. Last time her friends tripped the alarm system twice." Rebecca nodded, making a mental note to call their security consultant in the morning. Sarah, James's 22-year-old daughter from his first marriage, had been 12 when Rebecca entered her life. Their relationship had evolved from the awkward wariness of a preteen meeting her father's new girlfriend to something that resembled a mother-daughter bond, though neither ever explicitly named it as such. Later that night, as James slept beside her, Rebecca lay awake, a familiar restlessness keeping sleep at bay. When had her life become this endless performance, the perfect wife, the flawless hostess, the woman whose own ambitions had been so carefully channeled into supporting her husband's empire? The question wasn't new, but lately, it surfaced with increasing frequency, usually in these quiet moments when the day's careful choreography ended. It's just middle age, her friend Melissa had suggested during their monthly lunch. Everyone questions their choices at our age. It's normal. But the hollow feeling in Rebecca's chest didn't feel normal. It felt like a warning, like the subtle pressure drop before a storm. Something was changing, though she couldn't yet name what. 3 weeks later, that undefined unease crystallized into something far more concrete. Rebecca was reorganizing James's home office closet, a task he'd requested when he couldn't locate specific financial records when she discovered the folder. It was unmarked, tucked behind winter sweaters in a storage box labeled Tax 2018. Inside were bank statements from an institution she didn't recognize, correspondence regarding property purchases in the Cayman Islands, and transfer confirmations for sums that made her breath catch. The most recent statement showed a balance of $23 million dollars in an account bearing only James's name. Rebecca stared at the documents, her hands trembling slightly. In 15 years of marriage, she had never seen these accounts. Their financial arrangements had gradually evolved to a system where James's team handled most details, providing Rebecca with summarized quarterly reports that she had accepted without question. A mistake, she now realized. Without conscious thought, she gathered the documents, grabbed her car keys, and drove to James's office downtown. His calendar showed he would be in meetings all afternoon. Meetings she had arranged herself the previous week. The drive was a blur, her mind racing between explanations. A surprise, perhaps a tax strategy she hadn't been briefed on, but the coldly rational part of her brain, the part that had built a tech company from nothing, rejected these comforting possibilities. As she pulled into the underground parking garage of the Mitchell Group headquarters, she spotted James's Tesla already headed toward the exit. Beside him sat Monica Sanders, his 32-year-old executive assistant, her blonde head turned toward him, laughing at something he'd said. Rebecca made a split-second decision, pulling her car around to follow them. They merged into afternoon traffic, heading not toward any client office or restaurant she recognized, but toward the Marina District. Rebecca maintained distance, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it over the engine. 15 minutes later, James's car pulled into the private parking garage beneath the Ritz-Carlton residences. No, Rebecca whispered to herself. No, no, no. She drove past, circled the block, then parked illegally on a side street, moving on autopilot. She walked to the hotel entrance, mind racing. The folder of financial documents remained on her passenger seat, momentarily forgotten in the face of this new suspicion. The lobby was busy with afternoon check-ins. Rebecca approached the concierge desk, summoning the poised confidence that had once been her professional trademark. I need to leave a package for my husband, James Mitchell, she said smoothly. He's in a meeting here and forgot some important documents. The concierge nodded professionally. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell is in the Wellington suite. I can have it delivered. Thank you, but I'll take it up myself. Rebecca interrupted, already moving toward the elevators. It's quite confidential. Before the concierge could respond, she was in the elevator, pressing the button for the 14th floor. Her pulse raced, adrenaline sharpening her focus to a painful clarity. The Wellington suite would be at the end of the hall. She and James had stayed there themselves 2 years ago during a charity weekend. The corridor stretched before her, plush carpet muffling her footsteps. At the suite door, she hesitated, her hand hovering above the polished wood. Once she knocked, everything would change. Their carefully constructed life would fracture along fault lines she had pretended not to see. Instead of knocking, she pressed her ear to the door, hearing nothing but the pounding of her own heart. She reached for her phone, dialing James's number inside the suite. A phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Then James's voice, sounding breathless. Mitchell? James, it's me, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Where are you? I need to talk to you about something important. A pause. In a meeting at Westridge Capital. Can it wait until tonight? Behind his voice, she heard a woman's laugh, quickly stifled. You're lying to me, Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm outside the Wellington suite right now. Open the door, James. The silence stretched for 3 excruciating seconds. Rebecca, he finally said, his tone shifting to something conciliatory. This isn't what you think. We're working on a sensitive acquisition. Privacy was essential. Open the door, she repeated. Another pause. Then the electronic lock clicked. The door swung open to reveal James, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, suit jacket discarded. Behind him, Monica sat at a dining table covered with documents, her lipstick slightly smudged. This is completely unprofessional, James said, his voice low but sharp. We're in the middle of confidential negotiations. Rebecca pushed past him into the suite, taking in the room with one sweeping glance, the open bottle of champagne, 2 glasses, Monica's shoes kicked off under the table, the door to the bedroom slightly ajar, the bed visible with its covers disturbed. How long? Rebecca asked, her voice surprisingly calm despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. This is ridiculous, James began. We're working on the Talaris acquisition. Monica's team discovered some irregularities in their reporting, and we needed to review them away from the office in case. Stop lying. Rebecca's voice cut like glass. How long have you been sleeping with her? Monica stood abruptly. I should go, she murmured, gathering papers into a portfolio with trembling hands. Stay exactly where you are, Rebecca said, not looking at her. I want to hear it from him. James's expression hardened, the mask of concerned husband giving way to something colder. You're making a scene over nothing. This is about business. The business you conduct in hotel beds. Rebecca gestured toward the bedroom. I'm not a fool, James, not anymore. Something in his eyes shifted calculation, replacing denial. His posture straightened almost imperceptibly as he made some internal decision. Fine, he said, his voice flat. This isn't how I wanted to have this conversation, but since you're determined to force the issue, yes, Monica and I have been seeing each other. It's been going on for about a year. The confirmation hit Rebecca like a physical blow, though she'd known it was coming. A year. While she'd been planning their anniversary trip to Kyoto, hosting dinner parties for his investors, supporting his charitable foundation, he'd been building a parallel life that excluded her entirely. And the accounts in the Cayman Islands, she asked, remembering the folder in her car. Were those also something you didn't want to discuss? James's eyes narrowed dangerously. What accounts? The $23 million you've hidden in offshore accounts under your name only. The property purchases through shell companies. The systematic transfers from our joint assets. Monica looked between them, her expression confused. Clearly, she hadn't been privy to this aspect of James's deception. You've been going through my private papers, James said, his voice deadly quiet. I was organizing your office closet, as you asked me to. Rebecca replied, though I'm beginning to understand why you've been so insistent on handling all our finances. James glanced at Monica. Give us the room. Monica gathered her things and slipped out without meeting Rebecca's eyes, closing the suite door behind her. Once they were alone, James's demeanor changed completely. The pretense of the concerned husband vanished, replaced by cold efficiency. Let's not make this more melodramatic than it needs to be, he said, moving to pour himself a drink from the bar. Marriages end, ours has run its course. I've been planning an exit strategy. Yes, the offshore accounts are part of a legitimate tax structure that protects our assets. Our assets, Rebecca repeated. The accounts are in your name only. He shrugged, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. A technical detail that can be adjusted in the settlement. Settlement? The word hung in the air between them. You've been planning to divorce me. I've been planning for contingencies, he corrected smoothly. It's what I do, Rebecca, you know that. Plan for all possible scenarios and position assets accordingly. Rebecca stared at the stranger before her. This man she had shared a bed with for 15 years, whose ambitions she had supported, whose success she had facilitated in countless ways. When, she asked, her voice barely audible, when what? When did you decide our marriage was a contingency to be planned for? When did I become just another asset to be positioned? James sighed, impatience showing through his controlled facade. Does it matter? The fact is, we've been moving in different directions for years. You must have felt it too. Rebecca thought of the hollow feeling that had been growing inside her, the restlessness that kept her awake at night. But that hadn't been about wanting to leave it, had been about wanting to reclaim parts of herself that had been gradually surrendered during their marriage. I felt something, she admitted, but I never planned an exit strategy behind your back. I never lied to you about where I was or who I was with. I never siphoned money into secret accounts. Because you didn't need to, he said, his tone dismissive. I've provided everything, the lifestyle, the homes, the social position. What would you have needed an exit strategy for? The casual cruelty of his assessment, the implication that she had been merely a beneficiary of his success rather than a partner in creating it, ignited something in Rebecca that had been dormant for too long. Provided everything, she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. I sold my company for $100 million before I met you. I brought connections and expertise that directly led to your 3 biggest investment successes. I've spent 15 years managing your reputation, smoothing your path, making you palatable to people who would otherwise see right through you. James waved his hand dismissively. Ancient history. What have you done lately except spend the money I've earned? Rebecca felt as though she'd been slapped. The question revealed how completely he had rewritten their history, casting her as a decorative accessory rather than a fundamental contributor to their shared success. I think we're done here, she said, gathering her dignity around her like armor. I'll be calling my lawyer in the morning. James smiled thinly. That would be Milton Grayson's firm. Correct, they've represented us for years. The implication was clear. The lawyers, like everything else in their shared life, were ultimately loyal to him. I'll find my own representation, she replied coldly. Of course you will. His tone was almost pitying. Though I should mention that our prenuptial agreement is quite comprehensive. Your lifestyle will change significantly. Rebecca, we don't have a prenup, she said, confusion momentarily displacing anger. We decided against it before the wedding. You said it created unnecessary adversarial dynamics. James's smile didn't reach his eyes. Check your files. You signed it the day before the ceremony. After the rehearsal dinner, you'd had quite a bit of champagne, if I recall. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face as a long-forgotten memory surfaced James, presenting papers he described as last-minute wedding insurance details that needed immediate signatures. She'd been distracted, exhausted from wedding preparations, slightly intoxicated, and completely trusting. That's fraud, she whispered. It's your signature on a legally executed document, he countered smoothly. But by all means, challenge it in court. That should be entertaining for everyone involved. Rebecca stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time in 15 years. Not the charismatic financial wizard she'd fallen in love with, but something far more calculating and cold. This isn't over, she said, turning toward the door. It effectively is, James replied, his voice almost bored, but we can pretend otherwise for a while if it makes you feel better. Rebecca walked out without another word, maintaining her composure through the hotel corridor, into the elevator, across the lobby. Only when she reached her illegally parked car did she allow the first tears to fall, hot and silent down her cheeks. She sat motionless behind the wheel, the folder of offshore account documents still on the passenger seat, as the full impact of the afternoon's revelations washed over her. Her marriage was a lie. Her husband was a stranger. The life she had accepted, with all its compromises and concessions, had been built on a foundation that was now crumbling beneath her feet. But beneath the shock and grief, something else stirred, a flicker of the strategic intelligence that had once built a tech empire from nothing. James thought he had won already, had positioned his pieces perfectly for a clean exit that would leave her with nothing. He had forgotten who she was before she became Mrs. James Mitchell. He had underestimated her. And that, Rebecca realized as she finally started the car, might be the one mistake that would cost him everything. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of shock and wild emotional swings. Rebecca checked into the Four Seasons under her maiden name, unable to face returning to the penthouse that suddenly felt like enemy territory. She alternated between periods of numbing disbelief and volcanic rage, between desperate grief for the marriage she thought she had and cold calculation about what must come next. By morning, the emotional fog began to clear, replaced by a clarity she hadn't felt in years. James had been planning his exit for at least 3 years, the earliest date on the offshore account statements, which meant she needed to be equally strategic, equally patient. This wouldn't be resolved in days or weeks. This was war, and wars required preparation. Her first call was to Diane Winters, her former business mentor from her tech days. At 78, Diane had mostly retired from active business involvement, but her mind remained razor-sharp, her network unparalleled. Well, this is a surprise, Diane answered, her voice carrying the slight raspiness of age, but none of its frailty. Rebecca Mitchell, emerging from the gilded cage. To what do I owe the honor? The gentle rebuke wasn't lost on Rebecca. Their relationship had cooled considerably after her marriage to James, who had dismissed Diane as old school and irrelevant to modern finance. I need your help, Diane, Rebecca said simply. James has been planning to leave me. He's hidden assets, manipulated documents, and constructed an exit strategy designed to leave me with nothing. A long pause followed. I see, Diane finally said, her tone shifting from ironic to focused. Are you somewhere private where we can speak freely? Hotel room? Registered under my maiden name? Good. First smart move. Diane's brisk efficiency was exactly what Rebecca needed. Tell me everything, starting with when you first suspected something was wrong. Rebecca laid out the events of the previous day, the discovery of the offshore accounts, confronting James and Monica at the hotel, the revelation about the fraudulent prenuptial agreement. He's been planning this for at least 3 years, she concluded, Possibly longer. Of course he has, Diane said matter-of-factly. I warned you about him at your engagement party. If you recall, I said he had hungry eyes. Not ambitious hungry, desperate hungry. Rebecca did remember, though she had dismissed it at the time as the natural suspicion of an older mentor concerned about losing influence. I should have listened, she admitted. Water under the bridge, Diane replied briskly. The question is what you do now. Do you want to fight for a fair settlement, or do you want to make sure he regrets ever thinking he could discard you like yesterday's newspaper? Rebecca considered the question carefully. I want what's fair, she said slowly. Everything I contributed to building. But I also want him to understand exactly who he underestimated. That's my girl, Diane said, and Rebecca could hear the smile in her voice. Here's what happens next. You're going to meet me at my office today at 3. Use the service entrance on Mason Street. Tell no one where you're going. Bring any financial records you can access. And Rebecca, remove any electronics James gave you: phone, laptop, tablet. Leave them at the hotel. You think he's monitoring me? I think a man who plans an exit strategy for 3 years while sharing a bed with you is capable of anything, Diane replied grimly. Better safe than sorry. After ending the call, Rebecca followed Diane's instructions meticulously. She purchased a cheap prepaid phone from a convenience store, then used the hotel business center to access what financial records she could through her personal email. Many accounts had already been locked, James moving quickly to restrict her access, but she managed to download statements from her personal checking account and investment portfolio, which thankfully remained under her control. At precisely 3 o'clock, Rebecca slipped through the service entrance of the historic Woolworth building, where Diane maintained an office. The elevator opened directly into a wood-paneled reception area where Diane waited, elegant in a charcoal suit despite her age, silver hair swept into a sleek chignon. You look like hell, Diane said by way of greeting, embracing Rebecca briefly. But that's to be expected. Come through. There are people you need to meet. She led Rebecca into a conference room where 3 people waited. Thomas Warren, the best divorce attorney in California. Diane introduced a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes. Eric Donovan, security consultant and former FBI cybercrime specialist. A weathered-looking man in his 50s nodded curtly. And Vivian Zhao, forensic accountant extraordinaire. A sharp-eyed Asian woman in her 40s offered a brief smile. This is my war council, Rebecca asked, slightly overwhelmed. This is your survival team, Diane corrected. James has been positioning pieces on the board for years. We need to rapidly assess your situation and develop countermeasures. Thomas Warren spoke first, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to courthouse performances. Mrs. Mitchell, based on what Diane has shared, your situation is serious but not hopeless. California is a community property state, which means assets acquired during the marriage should be divided equally. However, if your husband has successfully hidden significant assets and manipulated documents like the prenuptial agreement, we face an uphill battle. How bad is it? Rebecca asked bluntly. Without seeing the prenup, I can't say for certain. But if it was executed the day before your wedding under the circumstances you described, we have grounds to challenge its validity. Coercion, misrepresentation, lack of proper legal representation for you all potential avenues. Eric Donovan leaned forward, his expression grave. The more immediate concern is security. Based on the offshore accounts you discovered, your husband likely has sophisticated surveillance in place, monitoring your communications, tracking your movements, possibly even recording conversations in your homes. Rebecca felt a chill at the thought. How would we know? We wouldn't until we sweep for devices, Eric replied. But the safer assumption is that everything electronic in your shared spaces is compromised. Phones, computers, home security systems, even vehicles often have tracking capabilities, which is why this meeting had to happen in a secure location. Vivian Zhao spread financial documents on the table. From what we've gathered so far, James has been systematically moving assets offshore for approximately 3 years. The accounts you discovered likely represent only a fraction of what he's hidden. My preliminary analysis suggests we're looking at potentially $50 to $70 million that's been positioned beyond normal discovery processes. The figure made Rebecca's head spin. $70 million siphoned away from their shared assets without her knowledge. What do I do? She asked, looking around the table. How do I fight this? Diane placed a hand on Rebecca's shoulder. The same way you built your company from nothing, with strategy, patience, and absolute conviction that you will win. Thomas outlined the initial legal approach. Filing for divorce first would give them certain procedural advantages, but they needed more information before making that move. Eric explained the security protocols they would establish secure communications, swept locations for meetings, counter surveillance measures. Vivian detailed how they would begin tracking and documenting the hidden financial empire James had constructed. As the meeting progressed, Rebecca felt something shift inside her, the shock and grief receding, replaced by cold determination. This wasn't just about money or even justice. This was about reclaiming the woman she had been before James Mitchell, the strategist, the builder, the force of nature who had once commanded respect in boardrooms across Silicon Valley. There's one more thing, Diane said as the meeting concluded. You need operating capital money James can't trace or control. Do you have any assets he doesn't know about, anything set aside that wasn't merged into your joint holdings? Rebecca thought carefully. Maybe, years ago, I made an angel investment in a friend's medical device startup, about $150,000. James dismissed it as charity for your college friend. The company was acquired last year, but in the chaos of the acquisition, I never told James about the payout. It should be about $1.5 million paid to my personal account. Diane smiled. Not much against what we're fighting for, but it's a start. Clean money he doesn't know about. We can work with that. As Rebecca prepared to leave through the same discreet entrance, Thomas handed her a business card with a number handwritten on the back. This is my private line. If James files for divorce before we're ready, call immediately, day or night. Don't communicate through email or your regular phone. How long do we have? Rebecca asked. Hard to say, Thomas replied. If he follows the playbook I've seen with similar clients, he'll wait until he's absolutely certain all assets are positioned where he wants them. Could be days, could be weeks, but when he moves, he'll move fast, designed to catch you off guard. Rebecca nodded, tucking the card into her pocket. I understand. One last thing, Diane said, walking her to the elevator. You need to decide how you want to play this next phase. James believes you're devastated, possibly panicking. That perception gives us room to maneuver. You're saying I should pretend nothing's wrong. Go back to the penthouse and play the dutiful wife while he's sleeping with his assistant and hiding our money. I'm saying strategic deception works both ways, Diane replied. You don't have to pretend nothing's wrong. He knows you know about Monica, but appearing less strategic than you are, less prepared, that could be valuable? Rebecca considered this as the elevator arrived. So, I go home, act appropriately upset about the affair, but don't let on that I'm preparing for war? Precisely. Diane squeezed her arm. Channel that brilliant strategist I mentored years ago. She's still in there, and James has no idea what she's capable of. Um... Rebecca returned to the penthouse that evening. Having carefully considered her approach, she would neither confront James about the offshore accounts again, nor pretend the hotel incident hadn't happened. Instead, she would present as a woman grappling with her husband's infidelity, but not yet fully aware of the financial deception underway. James was in his home office when she arrived. The door open, his manner casual, as if nothing significant had transpired. You're back, he noted, barely glancing up from his computer. I needed some time to think, Rebecca replied, keeping her voice deliberately controlled. Where do we go from here, James? He swiveled his chair to face her, expression carefully neutral. That depends on what you want. If you're willing to be reasonable, we can handle this discreetly. No public drama, no messy court battles. And Monica. That situation will be managed appropriately, he said, his tone making it clear the relationship would continue regardless of Rebecca's feelings. I see. Rebecca maintained her composure, though it required every ounce of self-control. And our marriage, is there anything left to salvage? James studied her, perhaps searching for signs of the anger she displayed at the hotel, finding instead a woman who appeared wounded but reconciled to negotiation. He relaxed slightly. Let's be practical, Rebecca. We've had 15 good years, but we both know things have changed. You want different things. I want different things. A clean break might be best for everyone. A clean break, she repeated, meaning divorce. Eventually, yes, but it doesn't have to be adversarial. My lawyers can draft a fair settlement. You'll be taken care of. The condescension in his tone, the assumption that she needed to be taken care of rather than receive her rightful share of their marital assets, nearly cracked her facade. But Rebecca maintained her performance, nodding slowly as if processing this inevitable conclusion. I need time, she said quietly. This is all happening very fast. James nodded magnanimously. Of course, take whatever time you need. The guest room is made up if you prefer to sleep separately for now. Thank you, she said, the words acid on her tongue. I think that would be best. As she turned to leave, James called after her. Rebecca, I truly am sorry it's ending this way. We had a good run. She didn't trust herself to respond. merely nodding before walking away. Once inside the guest bedroom, she leaned against the closed door, breathing deeply to control the fury threatening to overwhelm her. The casual dismissal of 15 years as a good run, the transparent manipulation, the utter confidence that she would accept whatever settlement he deigned to offer it, confirmed everything her team had warned about. James Mitchell thought he was dealing with a decorative wife who would be easily managed during his exit strategy. He had no idea he was facing an opponent who had once built and sold a multi-million-dollar company before she'd ever met him, a woman who was rapidly remembering exactly who she had been and what she was capable of. The game was on, and despite his 3-year head start, James had made one critical miscalculation. He had completely underestimated his opponent. Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca executed a careful balancing act. To James, she presented the image of a woman reluctantly accepting the end of her marriage, occasionally emotional, but ultimately resigned to an amicable separation. She continued managing their social obligations, maintaining appearances at charity functions and dinner parties where they performed the role of the perfect couple. Behind this facade, she worked methodically with her team. Eric swept her car for tracking devices, finding two, provided her with a secure phone and laptop, and taught her basic counter-surveillance techniques. Thomas prepared the groundwork for divorce filings, gathering evidence of James's infidelity while researching the potentially fraudulent prenuptial agreement. Vivian tracked financial movements, documenting each transfer and hidden account they could identify. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, 3 weeks after the hotel confrontation. Rebecca was alone in the penthouse, James away on what he claimed was a business trip to Chicago, though Eric's surveillance confirmed he was actually at a resort in Cabo with Monica. Taking advantage of his absence, Rebecca was thoroughly searching his home office for any additional documentation of hidden assets. The wall safe behind the Rothko painting yielded nothing useful, just jewelry and passports. The hidden compartment in his desk contained only client files. It was when she removed books from the custom shelves, checking for hidden spaces, that she heard a hollow sound when she tapped the back panel of the third shelf. Careful examination revealed a concealed button mechanism. When pressed, a small section of the panel slid open, revealing a hidden storage space. Inside was a single thumb drive, unlabeled. Rebecca's heart raced as she pocketed the drive. Whatever was on it, James had felt the need to hide it beyond his usual security measures. She immediately left the penthouse, taking a circuitous route to ensure she wasn't followed. Before meeting Eric at a secure location he'd established in an unmarked office building downtown. Could be nothing, Eric cautioned as he connected the drive to a standalone computer, isolated from any networks. Could be personal photos, could be client data, or it could be what we need, Rebecca replied, watching intently as he navigated through the drive's contents. The drive contained hundreds of files, meticulously organized in folders labeled by year. As Eric opened them, Rebecca's suspicions were confirmed. These weren't just records of offshore accounts. This was the complete architecture of James's exit strategy. Financial transfers, property purchases through shell companies, tax structures designed to shield assets from discovery during divorce proceedings, and most damning of all, emails between James and his private banker discussing ways to remove Rebecca from accounts without triggering her awareness. Holy shit, Eric muttered, scrolling through the documents. This guy documented everything. It's a complete roadmap of his plan to leave you with nothing. One document in particular caught Rebecca's attention, a PDF labeled Prenup Execution. Opening it revealed detailed notes about the night before their wedding, including R consumed approximately 3 glasses champagne, plus 1 Ambien before signing, witnesses confirmed signature, document filed with Johnson separately from wedding license to avoid later discovery. He drugged me, Rebecca whispered, staring at the screen. The night before our wedding, he deliberately got me intoxicated, gave me a sleeping pill, and had me sign a prenup I don't even remember seeing. Eric's expression hardened. That's not just unethical. That's criminal. Drugging someone to obtain signatures on legal documents is fraud, possibly assault. Can we prove it after 15 years? These notes are a start. We'd need to find the witnesses, get them to confirm what happened. Eric continued examining files. There's more here. Rebecca, investment accounts in Singapore, property holdings in Monaco, a whole network of shell companies. He's hidden closer to 100 million, not the 70 we estimated. Rebecca felt lightheaded. The scale of the deception planned and executed over years while they shared a home, a bed, a life was almost incomprehensible. Make copies of everything, she instructed. Then put the drive back exactly where I found it. He can't know we've discovered this. As Eric worked, Rebecca stepped away to collect her thoughts. The evidence on the drive changed everything. Not only did they now have a complete map of James's hidden financial empire, but they had documented proof of fraud in the prenuptial agreement. The balance of power had shifted dramatically. "What's our next move?" Eric asked when he'd finished copying the files. "We gather more evidence," Rebecca replied. "A strategy already forming. James thinks he's winning. Let's let him keep thinking that while we build an airtight case." Eric nodded, impressed by her composure. Most people would be falling apart discovering their spouse went to these lengths to deceive them. "I'm not most people," Rebecca said quietly. "James seems to have forgotten that." That night, alone in the guest bedroom of the penthouse, Rebecca couldn't sleep. The magnitude of James's betrayal kept her staring at the ceiling, mind racing through implications and potential strategies. It wasn't just the money, though $100 million was certainly significant. It was the calculated nature of the deception, the fact that even as he'd built a life with her, he'd been systematically preparing to discard her. Her phone, her secure phone, not the one James knew about, vibrated with a text message. "Unknown number, building lobby, important. Come alone. S. S." Sarah James's daughter was supposed to be at graduate school in Boston. What would she be doing in San Francisco in the middle of the night? Rebecca dressed quickly and took the private elevator to the lobby, instinctively cautious. When the doors opened, she found Sarah pacing near the concierge desk, wearing jeans and a rumpled Stanford sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. At 22, she was a striking young woman with her father's height and commanding presence, but none of his calculated coldness. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Is everything all right?" Sarah looked up, her expression a mixture of anger and determination. "We need to talk, not here. The night manager is watching us," Sarah interrupted. "Let's go for a drive." Once in Rebecca's car, Sarah seemed to relax marginally. "I've been trying to find a way to talk to you privately. Dad has people watching the penthouse, monitoring your regular phone, your email." Rebecca nodded, unsurprised after Eric's warnings. "I know, but how do you know?" Sarah stared out the window as Rebecca drove aimlessly through the quiet streets. "Because he's doing the same to me. Has been for years." "What? Why would James be monitoring you?" "To protect his precious money," Sarah replied bitterly. "The trust fund for my mother, the one I'm supposed to gain control of when I turn 25. He's been systematically draining it for years through management fees, investment opportunities, and administrative costs." Rebecca felt a fresh wave of shock. "He's stealing from your inheritance." "Not technically stealing, just ensuring I never get my hands on the full amount my mother intended for me." Sarah turned to face Rebecca directly. "I found out 6 months ago when I had an independent audit done as part of a finance class project. By the time I'm 25, there will be less than a quarter of the original amount left. Does he know you've discovered this?" "No. I've been careful. But when I heard about what happened at the Ritz—" "Yes, that kind of news travels fast in their circle. I knew I had to warn you. He's going to do to you what he did to my mother, what he's doing to me. Take everything and leave you with scraps." Rebecca processed this new information, fitting it into the expanding puzzle of James's deceptions. Your mother, his first wife. What happened there? Exactly. He never talks about the divorce. "Because it's not the story he likes to tell," Sarah said grimly. "The official version is that they grew apart, separated amicably, and he generously provided for both of us. The reality, he systematically isolated her, convinced her she was mentally unstable, and manipulated her into accepting a settlement that was a fraction of what she was entitled to. By the time she realized what had happened, it was too late." "How do you know all this?" "She told me, right before she died. Cancer, 3 years ago." Sarah's voice caught slightly. Her last coherent conversation was warning me about him. "Watch the money," she said. "He'll use it to control you, just like he did with me." Rebecca reached across to squeeze Sarah's hand. "I'm so sorry. About your mother. About all of this." "I don't want your sympathy," Sarah replied, though she didn't pull her hand away. "I want your help, and I want to help you. He's going to try to destroy you. Rebecca, he'll use every dirty trick, every connection, every advantage. But he doesn't know that I've been gathering evidence against him for years." "Evidence," Sarah nodded grimly. "Everything. Financial records, recordings of conversations where he discusses how to manipulate the trust, emails with his financial team. I was planning to use it when I turned 25 to force him to restore what he's taken from the trust. But now, with what he's doing to you, I think we need to combine forces." Rebecca studied the young woman beside her, this stepdaughter she had helped raise for a decade. who had apparently been waging her own silent battle against James's manipulations. "Why would you help me?" Rebecca asked carefully. "I'm not your mother. After the divorce, I won't be any relation to you at all." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "You were the only adult in my life who showed up consistently. Every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every hospital visit when I had pneumonia sophomore year, it was you, not him. He was always too busy, too important. You never were." The simple acknowledgement of what Rebecca had considered basic parenting brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Besides," Sarah continued, "we have a common enemy. And I've learned enough from watching him to know that the only way to win against James Mitchell is to be more strategic, more patient, and more ruthless than he is." Rebecca nodded slowly, a new dimension of the battle taking shape in her mind. "We'll need to be careful. He can never know we're working together." "I've been hiding things from my father since I was 12, Sarah replied with a grim smile. "I'm very good at it." As they continued driving through the sleeping city, Rebecca and Sarah began outlining their combined strategy. Sarah would return to Boston, maintaining the appearance of the dutiful daughter while continuing to gather evidence. Rebecca would proceed with her existing plan, now enhanced by Sarah's knowledge and resources. "There's one more thing you should know," Sarah said as Rebecca finally turned the car back toward the penthouse. "Dad's been seeing doctors, specialist appointments that don't appear on his official calendar. Monica doesn't even know about them." "What kind of specialists?" "Oncologists," Sarah replied quietly. "I accessed his private medical portal. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed 4 months ago. Prognosis uncertain, but not good. 3 to 5 years. Possibly less." Rebecca felt the world tilt beneath her. Cancer. Terminal cancer. The revelation cast James's accelerated timeline in an entirely new light. "That's why he's moving now," she whispered. "He's trying to secure everything before he runs out of time." Sarah finished. "It doesn't excuse what he's doing, but it explains the urgency." Rebecca completed the thought. "Does anyone else know?" "I don't think so. The appointments are under a different name. Paid in cash." Classic dad controlling the narrative until the end. As they parted in the lobby, Sarah handed Rebecca a small USB drive. "Everything I've collected so far. Be careful with it." Rebecca hugged her stepdaughter tightly. "We'll fix this, Sarah, for both of us." "I know we will," Sarah replied with a confidence beyond her years. "He taught us both to be survivors, just not the way he intended." Watching Sarah walk away, Rebecca felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for James's illness, fury at his continued deceptions, and a fierce protective instinct toward this young woman who had somehow become family in all the ways that truly mattered. The battle ahead had just become infinitely more complicated. But with Sarah's unexpected alliance, the balance of power had shifted once again. James Mitchell was fighting a war on two fronts without even knowing it, against the wife he thought he could discard and the daughter he thought he could control, and neither woman intended to lose. The formal divorce proceedings began exactly as Thomas Warren had predicted, without warning, and designed for maximum psychological impact. Rebecca was hosting a charity luncheon for the Children's Hospital when the process server approached. A thin envelope extended toward her in the middle of her welcome speech. "Rebecca Mitchell?" the young man asked, his voice carrying in the suddenly silent ballroom. "Yes," she replied, microphone still in hand, 200 of San Francisco's elite watching the scene unfold. "You've been served," he announced, handing her the divorce petition with a flourish that suggested he'd been instructed to make the moment as public and humiliating as possible. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as Rebecca accepted the envelope with outward composure, though her hands trembled slightly. She glanced down at the document, noted James's name on the petition, then looked back at her audience with a dignity that would later be described as remarkable by several society columnists. "My apologies for the interruption," she said, her voice steady. "As I was saying, the new pediatric oncology wing will provide cutting-edge treatment for children facing the most difficult battles of their young lives. I can think of no worthier cause for your generous support today." She continued her speech without missing another beat, refusing to give James the public spectacle he had clearly orchestrated. Only after the event concluded, after she had shaken hands and accepted condolences from pitying socialites, did she retreat to a private room and call Thomas Warren on her secure phone. "It's happened," she said simply. "Very public service at the hospital fundraiser." "Bastard," Thomas muttered. "Classic intimidation tactic. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Rebecca replied, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. After weeks of preparation, the actual filing felt almost anticlimactic. What's our next move? Come to the office. We've been preparing for this. And Rebecca, check your regular accounts immediately. He'll likely have frozen everything. Thomas was right. By the time Rebecca reached the secure browser on her phone, notifications had already arrived. Access denied to the joint checking account. Credit cards declined due to suspicious activity. Even her personal email showed signs of tampering password reset notifications she hadn't requested. James was moving quickly to isolate her financially and informationally, exactly as they had anticipated. Fortunately, she was prepared. The $1.5 million from her medical device investment was safely secured in accounts James knew nothing about. Eric had established secure communication channels beyond James's surveillance. Diane had arranged a furnished apartment in a discreet building owned by a former business associate, accessible without electronic keycards that might leave digital traces. When Rebecca arrived at Thomas's office, the full team was waiting: Diane, Eric, Vivian, and now Sarah, who had flown in from Boston upon hearing about the filing. He went with the nuclear option, Thomas explained, spreading the divorce petition across the conference table. Claims of financial mismanagement on your part, allegations that you've been unstable recently, requests for temporary control of all marital assets pending final settlement, and of course, reference to the prenuptial agreement you supposedly signed, which we know was fraudulently obtained, Rebecca noted. Correct, but proving that will take time. Meanwhile, he's moving to cut off your access to funds, restrict your ability to retain counsel, and essentially force you into accepting whatever settlement he offers out of desperation. Standard James Mitchell playbook, Sarah commented bitterly. He did exactly the same to my mother. Thomas continued. He's requested an emergency hearing tomorrow morning for temporary control of assets. His team will present you as emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible, claiming protective measures are necessary. Can we stop it? Rebecca asked. Better, Thomas replied with the first smile she'd seen from him. We can turn it against him. We've prepared our own filing counterclaims documenting his infidelity, financial misappropriation, and most importantly, specific references to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Singapore that he's failed to disclose. Rebecca understood the strategy immediately. We don't reveal everything we know, just enough to let him know we're not as blind as he thinks. Precisely, Thomas confirmed. We want him off balance but not yet aware of the full extent of our knowledge or evidence. The team spent hours preparing for the next day's hearing, reviewing documentation, rehearsing testimony, anticipating James's team's arguments. As midnight approached, only Rebecca and Sarah remained in the conference room, surrounded by legal documents and financial records. You should get some rest, Rebecca told her stepdaughter, noting the dark circles under her eyes. Tomorrow will be intense. Sarah shook her head. I'm too wired to sleep. Besides, I've been thinking about something. The medical records I found Dad's cancer diagnosis. We haven't discussed how or whether to use that information. Rebecca had been wrestling with the same question. James's illness complicated the moral landscape of their conflict. Using a terminal diagnosis as leverage in divorce proceedings felt unconscionable. Yet his own actions showed no similar ethical restraint. We don't use it, Rebecca decided. At least not now. His health condition doesn't change the fact that he's systematically hidden marital assets and committed fraud. We focus on the financial and legal issues. Sarah studied her thoughtfully. You still care about him, don't you? Despite everything. 15 years is a long time, Rebecca replied quietly. There were good years before this, but caring about someone and allowing them to destroy you are different things. I can acknowledge his illness while still fighting for what's right. Sarah nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. That's why you're different from him. He sees people as either assets or obstacles. You still see the humanity, even when it's complicated. The observation struck Rebecca deeply. In focusing on the strategic battle ahead, she had almost lost sight of the fundamental difference between her approach and James's, the recognition that even adversaries remained human, with all the complexity that entailed. Get some sleep, Sarah, she said gently. Tomorrow we start taking back what's ours. The courthouse hallway buzzed with whispered conversations as Rebecca walked toward courtroom 3, Thomas Warren beside her, Sarah following at a discreet distance to avoid being seen with them. James stood with his legal team near the entrance, 4 attorneys from Preston, Blackwell and Hayes, one of the city's most expensive firms. Monica was notably absent, a strategic choice to avoid inflaming the proceedings with evidence of infidelity. James himself looked immaculate, as always tailored gray suit, understated tie, the perfect image of a responsible financial steward concerned about his unstable wife's access to significant assets. Only Rebecca, who had shared his life for 15 years, noticed the subtle signs of strain, the tightness around his eyes, the slightly too firm set of his jaw. He caught her gaze as she approached, offering a small nod that might have appeared civil to observers, but conveyed a clear message to Rebecca. This is merely procedural. I've already won. She returned the nod with perfect composure, betraying nothing of the evidence secured in Thomas's briefcase or the strategic plan they had spent weeks developing. The hearing proceeded initially as expected. James's lead attorney, Maxwell Preston, presented their petition for temporary control of marital assets, citing Rebecca's erratic behavior following the discovery of James's relationship with Monica, her impulsive spending habits, and the clear language of the prenuptial agreement regarding asset management during separation. When Thomas rose for the counter-argument, the shift in energy was palpable. Your Honor, we not only contest this petition, but have filed an emergency motion of our own, he began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of absolute certainty. Mr. Mitchell's request for asset control represents the continuation of a systematic campaign to defraud Mrs. Mitchell of her rightful marital property. Preston objected immediately, but Thomas continued with barely a pause. We have documented evidence that Mr. Mitchell has concealed substantial marital assets in offshore accounts, specifically entities in the Cayman Islands registered under Blackwell Horizon Partners and in Singapore under Mitchell Strategic Holdings. These accounts, containing approximately $23 million in marital assets, were deliberately hidden from Mrs. Mitchell and have not been disclosed in Mr. Mitchell's financial declarations to this court. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, looked sharply at James and his legal team. Mr. Preston, is your client prepared to address these allegations? Preston conferred hurriedly with James, whose composed facade had visibly cracked. He stared at Rebecca with a mixture of shock and calculation, clearly trying to determine exactly how much she knew and how she had discovered it. Your Honor, these are spurious allegations designed to distract from the matter at hand. Preston finally responded. If Mrs. Mitchell has concerns about asset disclosure, the proper procedure is through formal discovery, not inflammatory accusations in an emergency hearing. I agree that full discovery is necessary, the judge replied firmly. And in light of these allegations, I'm denying the motion for temporary asset control. Furthermore, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing either party from transferring, concealing, or disposing of any marital assets pending full financial disclosure. Mr. Mitchell, you will provide complete documentation of all financial holdings, domestic and international, within 7 days. James's expression remained controlled, but Rebecca saw the slight twitch in his left eye, a tell she had noticed years ago when a major investment went sideways. He was recalculating, adjusting his strategy in real time. Additionally, the judge continued, the court will appoint a forensic accountant to review all financial records. Both parties will maintain access to existing joint accounts for reasonable living expenses only, with transactions over $10,000 requiring court approval. As they exited the courtroom, James maneuvered to intercept Rebecca in the hallway, smoothly separating her from Thomas with practiced ease. Impressive opening move, he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. I underestimated your resources. You underestimated me, Rebecca corrected, maintaining her composure despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. A recurring theme, it seems. His eyes narrowed slightly. The offshore accounts you mentioned, that's barely the surface. Rebecca, you have no idea how deep this goes, or how thoroughly I've prepared. Today was a minor setback, nothing more. Is that what you told yourself after the Westridge deal collapsed? Just a minor setback. Rebecca referenced a failed investment from years earlier, one of the few times she'd seen James genuinely rattled by a professional misstep. The comparison landed precisely as intended. James's carefully maintained expression slipped for a moment, revealing genuine anger. This isn't a game. No, Rebecca agreed. It's not. Games have fair rules and clear boundaries. This is something else entirely. Something you started, James. But I will finish. Before he could respond, Thomas appeared at her side. Our car is waiting. Rebecca? James stepped back, composure restored. We'll continue this discussion through proper channels. Give my best to your team, they've earned their retainer today. But remind them the match is still in the opening moves. As Rebecca walked away, she felt James's eyes following her, calculating, reassessing. Perhaps for the first time, seeing her not as the supportive wife he had manipulated for years, but as a worthy opponent who had drawn first blood. In the car, Thomas reviewed the morning's events. He revealed something important in there when he said, "You have no idea how deep this goes." He confirmed they're significantly more hidden than what we've already identified. I know, Rebecca replied. I saw his face when the judge mentioned the forensic accountant. He's worried, but not panicked, which means he believes his deeper financial structures are still secure. Then our next move is clear, Thomas said. We follow the money, deeper than he thinks we can go. Rebecca nodded, already formulating the next phase of their strategy. The initial confrontation had gone as planned. They had blocked James's attempt to cut off her financial resources while revealing just enough knowledge to unsettle him. But the real battle was just beginning. James would adapt quickly, probably moving assets to even more secure structures, possibly accelerating his timeline. They needed to move faster, dig deeper, and most importantly, continue to surprise him at every turn. The advantage of being underestimated was fading. From now on, James would approach her as a genuine threat, not an inconvenience to be managed. As they pulled up to the secure apartment building, Rebecca's secure phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Dad's called emergency meeting with financial team for tonight. Started moving assets immediately after hearing. I'm tracking transfers. The chess match was accelerating. But for the first time since discovering James's betrayal, Rebecca felt the electric thrill of genuine competition. The strategic clarity that had once built her tech company now focused on a different but equally complex challenge. James had awakened something in her that had been dormant for too long. He would soon regret it. Over the next 3 weeks, the divorce proceedings evolved into a complex, multi-layered conflict that extended far beyond the courtroom. As predicted, James had immediately begun restructuring his financial holdings, moving assets through increasingly obscure channels designed to place them beyond Rebecca's reach. What he didn't know was that Sarah had installed sophisticated tracking software on his personal laptop months earlier, giving them real-time visibility into his communications and financial movements. Combined with the documents from the hidden thumb drive, they had unprecedented insight into James's strategy. He's shifting everything to a new structure, Vivian explained during their daily strategy meeting, displaying complex diagrams of financial flows. Multiple layers of shell companies across 6 jurisdictions, with the assets ultimately controlled through a private foundation in Liechtenstein. Technically legal, but designed specifically to be impervious to discovery during divorce proceedings. Can we penetrate it? Rebecca asked. Not through conventional legal means, Thomas admitted. The structure crosses too many jurisdictional boundaries. By the time we obtain the necessary international court orders, the assets would be moved again. Rebecca considered this challenge, remembering a similar problem she'd faced when expanding her tech company into European markets years ago. What about approaching from the authentication side rather than the jurisdictional side she suggested? These structures require digital access protocols, identity verification systems. If we could identify the access points rather than chasing the assets themselves. Eric nodded slowly, understanding immediately. Digital skeleton keys. If we can identify how he authenticates into these structures, we can potentially track the assets without needing to overcome the jurisdictional hurdles. Exactly. James uses the same biometric patterns across his secure systems, a habit I noticed years ago. Specific keystroke rhythms, particular authentication sequences. It's a vulnerability we might exploit. The team worked through the night, combining Sarah's internal intelligence with Eric's cybersecurity expertise to map the digital pathways James used to control his hidden empire. By morning, they had identified a critical access point, a private banking portal managed through a Swiss institution that served as a central control mechanism for the entire structure. We can't access the portal directly, Eric cautioned. That would cross legal lines we don't want to cross. But we can monitor access patterns, track when and how he moves assets, and document the full scope of what he's hiding. Armed with this intelligence, Thomas filed a supplemental brief with the court, identifying with remarkable specificity the new financial structures James had created since the initial hearing. The filing didn't reveal how they had obtained this information, but presented enough concrete evidence to prompt the judge to issue an expanded disclosure order and freeze a broader range of assets. James's response was immediate and multi-pronged. His legal team filed motions questioning Rebecca's methods of obtaining financial information, suggesting improper surveillance or hacking. Simultaneously, he accelerated personal attacks designed to undermine her credibility and emotional stability. Rebecca's former friends, women from their social circle, who had once attended her dinner parties and charity events, suddenly began canceling lunch dates and declining invitations. Rumors circulated about prescription drug dependency, emotional outbursts, even suggestions of infidelity on her part. The narrative was clear. Rebecca was unstable, vindictive, possibly dangerous in her desperation. Most painfully, James attempted to drive a wedge between Rebecca and Sarah, During a scheduled dinner with his daughter, he expressed concerns about Rebecca's influence, suggesting that her vendetta against him was becoming unhealthy and destructive. He tried to convince me you were using me to get to him, Sarah reported afterward, her voice tight with controlled anger. Said I needed to be careful about getting involved in adult matters I didn't fully understand. That's classic manipulation, Diane observed. Isolate the target, undermine support systems, create doubt about perceptions. I know his playbook, Sarah replied grimly. I've been studying it my whole life. The psychological warfare intensified when James arranged for Rebecca's personal medical records to be anonymously submitted to the court records showing therapy sessions following a miscarriage 8 years earlier, including a temporary prescription for anti-anxiety medication. The implication was clear Rebecca had a history of emotional fragility that made her current claims suspect. The violation felt deeply personal. The miscarriage had been a private trauma, one James had seemed supportive through at the time. Learning he had weaponized this painful experience against her revealed a coldness that still had the power to shock, even after everything else she had discovered. Rather than retreating, Rebecca decided to address the issue directly, giving a brief statement to a carefully selected journalist known for her integrity. Yes, I sought therapy after losing a pregnancy. Like millions of women, I needed support during a difficult time. I'm not ashamed of prioritizing my mental health then, just as I'm not ashamed of fighting for what's rightfully mine now. If Mr. Mitchell believes that using such private pain as a legal tactic reflects well on his character, I'll leave that for others to judge. The statement transformed the narrative overnight. What James had intended as a devastating blow to Rebecca's credibility instead generated substantial sympathy, particularly among women. Several prominent female executives publicly expressed support, and a hashtag campaign emerged. Is Stand with Rebecca. You've shifted the battlefield, Thomas noted admiringly. Made it about character rather than legal technicalities. Very effective. I learned from the best, Rebecca replied. Though she wasn't referring to Thomas, years of watching James manipulate perceptions had taught her the power of narrative framing. The difference was that James constructed narratives based on calculation rather than truth. Rebecca had simply allowed genuine vulnerability to serve as its own powerful testimony. The most significant breakthrough came 7 weeks into the proceedings. Sarah, monitoring her father's medical portal, discovered he had begun more aggressive treatment for his cancer, an experimental protocol with significant side effects, but promising results for extending life expectancy. He's canceled 3 meetings this week, Sarah reported. Claimed food poisoning to his team, but it's the treatment side effects. He's getting desperate to wrap this up quickly. Which makes him vulnerable, Eric noted. When people rush, they make mistakes. The mistake came in the form of a late-night email James sent to his private banker in Geneva, an email Sarah intercepted through the monitoring software. In it, James referenced the Monaco arrangement and final transfers before closing the circle. The language was deliberately vague, but a single attachment provided the key they had been searching for: a complete organizational chart of James's financial structures, including entities they hadn't yet identified. This is it, Vivian breathed, studying the document. The complete architecture, nearly $100 million hidden across 27 entities in 9 jurisdictions. And look at the dates most of these structures were established 3 years ago, right after his diagnosis. He's been planning this since he learned he was ill. The revelation brought a complex mix of emotions for Rebecca. The scale of deception was breathtaking: 3 years of sharing a life, while James systematically prepared to leave her with nothing. Yet understanding that his illness had triggered this elaborate exit strategy added a dimension of tragedy to the calculated betrayal. What do we do with this? She asked the team, genuinely uncertain for the first time since they had begun. Thomas studied the chart carefully. Legally, this is our smoking gun. With this documentation, we can prove systematic fraud, deliberate concealment, and potentially even criminal financial misconduct. If we submit this to the court, James could face not just an unfavorable divorce settlement, but possible criminal charges. He's dying, Rebecca said quietly. Terminal cancer with perhaps a few years left, even with the experimental treatment. That doesn't excuse financial fraud or what he's done to you, Diane pointed out. No, it doesn't, Rebecca agreed. But it informs how I want to proceed. The team waited as Rebecca considered the options, respecting that the ultimate decision was hers alone. After several minutes of silence, she looked up with clear resolve. Here's what we're going to do. We don't expose the complete structure all at once. We reveal it in layers, starting with the most obviously improper transfers. Give James and his team time to recognize that we have the full picture. Then we offer a settlement, one that's fair and acknowledges my contribution to our marital assets, but doesn't destroy him completely. You're offering mercy, Sarah observed, her expression unreadable. I'm choosing justice over vengeance. Rebecca corrected. There's a difference. And Sarah, this approach also protects your inheritance. We can structure the settlement to restore what he's taken from your trust without public exposure that might harm you. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the distinction. My mother would have gone for the jugular, but then she wasn't as strong as you. Different kinds of strength, Rebecca replied gently. She did her best to protect you, just as we're doing now. The strategy was implemented with precision over the next 2 weeks. Thomas filed a series of increasingly specific discovery requests, each revealing another layer of James's hidden financial empire. As predicted, James's legal team recognized the pattern someone had obtained, the complete organizational chart, and was methodically exposing it piece by piece. The message was clear: we know everything. Continuing to fight is futile. The settlement offer arrived through formal channels exactly when James would be most receptive, immediately following a particularly difficult treatment session, when physical discomfort and mortality would be at the forefront of his mind. The terms were simple but comprehensive: equal division of all marital assets, including those hidden offshore, restoration of Sarah's trust to its original value, plus reasonable investment returns. No criminal charges for financial fraud or prenuptial agreement manipulation. No public disclosure of James's illness, which had remained private at his insistence. James requested a direct meeting with Rebecca. No lawyers, no witnesses. Against Thomas's advice, but following her own instincts, Rebecca agreed, specifying a neutral location, a private room at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, where they had held their engagement party 15 years earlier. The museum was closed to the public for a private event, providing the privacy they needed. Rebecca arrived early, choosing a seat that faced the door, unwilling to allow James the psychological advantage of watching her enter. When he appeared precisely at the appointed time, she was struck by the physical changes 7 weeks of treatment had wrought. James remained impeccably dressed in a custom suit that now hung slightly loose on his frame. The silver at his temples had spread, and fine lines around his eyes had deepened. Still handsome, still commanding, but visibly altered by the battle happening inside his body. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he said, taking the seat across from her. His voice remained strong, betraying none of the weakness his appearance suggested. I thought we should talk directly, Rebecca replied. We were married for 15 years. That deserves at least a conversation. James studied her for a long moment. You've surprised me, Rebecca. I didn't think you had this in you, the strategic thinking, the counterintelligence, the sheer determination. I underestimated you badly. Yes, you did, she agreed simply. How did you get the organizational chart? He asked, professional curiosity seemingly overriding other concerns. That document existed only on my secure server and in encrypted form with my private banker. It's been driving my team crazy trying to identify the leak. Rebecca smiled slightly. I have my resources. Sarah, he said suddenly, the realization dawning. She's been helping you. That's how you've stayed ahead of us internal intelligence. You underestimated her too, Rebecca pointed out. Another recurring theme. James absorbed this, nodding slowly. Like mother, like daughter, I suppose. She never trusted me either. With good reason, as it turns out. He didn't deny it, merely shrugged slightly. I've always done what I thought necessary. For myself, for the firm, for the future. By stealing from your daughter's inheritance, by drugging me to sign a prenup I never agreed to, by hiding $100 million while planning to leave me with nothing. Rebecca kept her voice level despite the emotions threatening to surface. How was any of that necessary? Control, James answered with surprising candor. Financial control is the only real security in this world. I learned that watching my father lose everything when I was 12, I swore it would never happen to me. So you'd rather be the one inflicting that loss on others, on your wife, your daughter. I'd rather be the one making the decisions, he corrected, the one determining outcomes rather than being subject to them. Rebecca recognized the raw truth in his statement. The driving force behind James's actions had always been control, the need to dictate circumstances rather than adapt to them. His cancer diagnosis, the ultimate loss of control, had only intensified this compulsion. And now, she asked, you've seen our settlement offer? It's fair, considerably more generous than what you planned for me. Yes, he acknowledged, though I'm curious why. You have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges, to take everything. Sarah, too, if she's involved as you suggest. Why the restraint? Rebecca considered the question carefully. Because this isn't about winning at all costs. It's about justice, not vengeance. And because despite everything, we shared 15 years, some of them were good years, James. He looked away, the first sign of genuine emotion she'd seen from him since this began. The settlement addresses the financial aspects, but it doesn't answer the more important question, which is, what happens to Sarah when I'm gone? His voice remained steady, but something in his eyes revealed the parent beneath the calculating financier. The experimental treatment is showing promise, but the prognosis remains limited. 3 to 5 years, possibly less. Sarah is an adult, Rebecca reminded him, capable of making her own choices. She needs family, James insisted. After everything, despite my failures as a father, I don't want her alone when it happens. Rebecca understood then what James was really asking, not just about Sarah's inheritance or legal standing, but about the emotional connection, the family bond that transcended the divorce. Sarah will always have me, she said simply. Whatever happens between you and me, that doesn't change. She's been my daughter in all the ways that matter for 10 years. That doesn't end with legal paperwork. Something like relief crossed James's face, quickly masked. Thank you for that. At least, it's not for you, Rebecca clarified. It's for her, and for me. James nodded, accepting the distinction. I'll sign the settlement. My lawyers will contact Thomas tomorrow with formal acceptance. As he rose to leave, he paused, looking down at Rebecca with an expression she couldn't quite read. For what it's worth, I did love you, Rebecca. In my way. Your way, she repeated thoughtfully. That's the problem, isn't it? Your way never included true partnership, true trust. You loved the image of us, the functionality, the convenience, but you never loved me enough to be honest, to be vulnerable, to share control. Perhaps, he conceded, or perhaps I never knew how. He left without another word, his posture still commanding despite the slight unevenness in his step, the powerful financier maintaining his carefully constructed image until the last possible moment. Rebecca remained seated, experiencing not the triumph she might have expected, but a complex melancholy. The victory felt hollow in some ways, winning a battle against a man already fighting for his life, extracting justice from someone whose time for true accountability was already limited by forces beyond anyone's control. Yet beneath that melancholy lay something more substantial, a profound reclamation of her own power, her own identity, her own future. She had faced systematic betrayal and responded not with collapse, but with strategic brilliance. She had encountered manipulation and countered with truth. She had been underestimated and proven her true capacity beyond any doubt. The settlement would restore her financial independence, approximately $50 million from the marital assets, plus her separate fortune built through careful investments during the divorce proceedings. But the greater value lay in what couldn't be measured in dollars, her rediscovered confidence, her proven resilience, her reclaimed sense of self. As Rebecca finally rose to leave the museum, her phone chimed with a message from Sarah. Is it done? Yes, she typed back. He's signing tomorrow. Your trust will be restored. What about you? Came Sarah's immediate response. Are you okay? Rebecca considered the question as she walked through the silent galleries, past artwork worth millions that suddenly seemed less significant than the human complexities she had navigated. I'm coming home, she replied finally. Not to any place, to myself. 3 months after the divorce settlement was finalized, Rebecca sat in the airy conference room of her new investment firm, reviewing quarterly performance reports. Mitchell Ventures focused exclusively on funding women-led companies, particularly those founded by women over 40 who were reinventing themselves after career interruptions or life transitions. The satisfaction of watching these businesses grow, many of them already showing remarkable returns, far exceeded the hollow achievements of her years as James's perfect corporate wife. Her own identity had reemerged, stronger for having been tested, clearer for having been temporarily obscured. Sarah had returned to graduate school in Boston, but visited monthly, their relationship evolving into something both more equal and more authentic than the quasi-parental role Rebecca had previously occupied. They spoke openly now about James's illness, about the complicated legacy of his actions, about forgiveness that acknowledged harm without excusing it. The intercom buzzed, interrupting Rebecca's thoughts. Ms. Mitchell, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. Eleanor Hayes. She says it's important. Rebecca frowned slightly. The name wasn't familiar, yet something about it triggered a vague recognition. Send her in, please. The woman who entered carried herself with the unmistakable confidence of significant power. In her early 70s, with silver hair cut in a sleek bob and wearing a tailored charcoal suit, she assessed the office with a quick, comprehensive glance before focusing on Rebecca. Ms. Mitchell, Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I'm Eleanor Hayes. Please, sit down, Rebecca offered, studying the stranger curiously. How can I help you? Eleanor settled into the chair with elegant efficiency. I'll be direct. I've been monitoring your situation with James Mitchell with considerable interest. Your handling of the divorce, in particular, demonstrated exceptional strategic thinking. A chill ran through Rebecca. You've been monitoring me. Why, who exactly are you? Professionally, I lead a consortium of family offices managing generational wealth for a select group of clients. Personally, she paused fractionally. I'm James's mother. Rebecca stared in shock. In 15 years of marriage, James had mentioned his mother only in vague terms, an economist living in Europe, estranged due to career differences, occasionally sending impersonal birthday cards. She had never met the woman. Never even seen a photograph. James's mother, she repeated, trying to process this revelation. He said you were in Switzerland, that you weren't close. Both partially true, Eleanor acknowledged. I do maintain a residence in Geneva, and we aren't close in the conventional sense. James and I have different approaches to power and its applications. Why are you here now? Rebecca asked, caution replacing surprise. The divorce is settled. If you're concerned about Sarah's inheritance, that's been protected. I'm not here about the divorce or Sarah, though I appreciate your protection of her interests. I'm here because of how you executed your counter strategy against James, particularly the financial architecture you constructed. Eleanor reached into her briefcase and removed a slim folder. Your parallel investment structure, the one you built while James thought he was isolating you financially, caught the attention of certain individuals in my network. The quantum encryption protocols, the jurisdictional ambiguity mechanisms, the strategic indeterminacy of asset positioning, these aren't typical divorce countermeasures. They represent financial innovation at a level we rarely encounter. Rebecca felt suddenly exposed, as if her most private thoughts had been observed without her knowledge. How do you know about those structures? They were designed to be invisible. To conventional financial surveillance, yes, but my consortium operates at different levels of visibility. Eleanor smiled slightly. We've been watching you rebuild yourself, Rebecca, not just financially, but strategically. Your new investment firm focusing on women reinventing themselves is personal for you, isn't it? Yes, Rebecca admitted, seeing no point in denial. I know what it's like to lose yourself in someone else's narrative, to have to rediscover your own voice and power. I want to help other women do the same, but with financial backing that makes it possible. Eleanor nodded approvingly. A worthy mission, and one that aligns with certain long-horizon initiatives within our consortium. We're interested in new models of power sustainable, regenerative approaches that transcend the zero-sum games people like James insist on playing. What exactly are you proposing? Rebecca asked, professional curiosity overcoming her wariness. Partnership? Eleanor replied simply. Access to our networks, our information architectures, our capital deployment mechanisms. In exchange for your strategic insights, your innovative financial structures, and your unique perspective on transformation. And James, does he know about this conversation? James operates at a level of financial sophistication that suits his purposes. Our consortium exists several layers above that, addressing longer time horizons, more complex systemic challenges. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. His illness is unfortunate. Despite our differences, he is my son, but his approach to power has always been extractive rather than generative. Yours, I suspect, is the opposite. Rebecca considered the extraordinary offer before her. Access to financial networks operating beyond conventional systems could exponentially amplify her ability to support women rebuilding their lives and careers. Yet something about Eleanor's careful phrasing suggested complexities beyond what was being explicitly stated. I need time to consider this, she said finally. It's not a decision I can make in one conversation. Of course, Eleanor agreed, rising smoothly. Consider it carefully. When you're ready to discuss further, use this. She placed a small encrypted drive on the desk. It contains secure communication protocols and preliminary information about our consortium. At the door, she paused. James once told me you were his greatest investment. He meant it as a compliment, though it reveals everything wrong with his worldview. People aren't investments. Rebecca, they're not assets to be acquired or liabilities to be managed. They're complex systems of potential, capable of transformation in ways no balance sheet can capture. You've proven that through your own remarkable evolution. After Eleanor departed, Rebecca sat motionless, processing the implications of this unexpected encounter. The encrypted drive on her desk represented a threshold access to financial dimensions beyond what she had already mastered. To networks operating with purposes and principles she was only beginning to comprehend. The offer was tantalizing, but Rebecca had learned through painful experience that power without clear purpose could become its own trap, as seductive and ultimately limiting as the gilded cage of her marriage had been. She placed the drive in her desk drawer rather than immediately accessing its contents. Whatever decision she made, whether engaging with Eleanor's consortium or pursuing entirely independent directions, would be determined by alignment with her own defined values rather than external validation or competitive positioning. The greater victory wasn't financial at all, but the profound recognition that power in its most authentic form isn't measured by what you can take from others or do to others, but by your capacity to live from the center of your own values without distortion by either fear or obligation. James had approached life as a zero-sum game, where his victory required someone else's loss. The networks Eleanor represented operated at higher levels of sophistication, but potentially within the same fundamental paradigm. The question facing Rebecca now was whether to advance within that paradigm or to step outside it entirely to play a different game with different metrics of success. She would make that decision not from reaction, but from intention, not from opposition, but from purpose, not from the past, but toward the future she chose to create. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across her office, beyond the windows. San Francisco continued its perpetual rhythm, a city constantly reinventing itself, embracing new possibilities while incorporating the lessons of its past. Rebecca felt a profound sense of alignment with that spirit of transformation. The woman who had once been Mrs. James Mitchell now existed entirely on her own terms, and that, in the end, was the only victory that truly mattered, not the settlement amount, not the strategic brilliance of her countermoves, but the reclamation of her authentic self. Rebecca picked up her phone and called Sarah. "How about dinner when you're in town next week? I've had the most extraordinary meeting, and I'd value your perspective." Some decisions were best made not in isolation, but in connection with those who truly mattered, not as strategic allies or useful assets, but as genuine family, chosen and cherished for exactly who they were. Coming home, Rebecca had discovered, wasn't about returning to a place or a past. It was about ascending from the deep waters of someone else's narrative into the clear air of your own truth, your own power, your own boundless potential. The skyline has changed now, viewed from a different window, through different eyes. The same city that witnessed her dismantling now bears silent testimony to her rebirth. She stands at the threshold between who she was and who she's becoming, no longer defined by the gilded cage of a fraudulent marriage, yet still carrying the wisdom those 15 years carved into her soul. The battle cost her illusions, comfortable lies, and the safety of predictable unhappiness. But what she gained cannot be measured in the $50 million of her settlement or the empire she's quietly building. Some might call it revenge, this meticulous reclamation of power, but revenge seeks only to destroy. She sought instead to remember to unearth the woman who existed before she became someone's carefully curated wife, to honor the strength that remained dormant but never died. We all make bargains with ourselves, surrendering pieces of our identity in small, almost imperceptible increments until one day, we barely recognize our own reflection. The most dangerous question isn't about what others have taken from us, but what we've allowed to be taken and whether we have the courage to reclaim it. Perhaps the true measure of victory isn't in destroying those who betrayed us, but in refusing to let their betrayal define us, in choosing, finally, to come home to ourselves.